What is up everyone? Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video. In this one, I'm going to be assembling the best sub $900 gaming PC that I believe you can assemble right now. There are some crazy good deals at the moment on GPUs and CPUs in particular, making now an awesome time to build a more budget-friendly gaming PC. But a system that still packs a punch, especially at 1080p, but also in select titles at 1440p too, without breaking the bank. Let's do this. As with all of my content here on the channel, I'll be splitting this video down into two distinct sections. First, I'm going to walk you through all the parts as I put the build together, talking about the strengths and weaknesses of everything and why I picked the components I did. And then in the second part of the video, we'll be taking a deep dive at performance, looking at all the latest titles, the most popular games, making sure this thing really stacks up and you guys get good value for money. Let's start, shall we, by looking at the CPU and GPU combo. These are the two most important parts in any build. And the Ryzen 5 7600 and Radeon 6650 XT is one of my favourites if you're shopping on a budget. Let's start with the CPU. This processor here from AMD comes with 6 cores and 12 threads and is based on their latest Zen 4 architecture. You can often find it for realistically $220, but sometimes as low as $199, and provides performance that's fairly on par with Intel's 13th Gen i5s for a lot less money. You're also going to see boost clock speeds in excess of 5 GHz, meaning your all-important single-thread performance is very strong. GPU-wise, I've picked up this, the Radeon RX 6650 XT. This is a really fantastic card for 1080p gaming, and my favourite GPU you can currently buy for under $250. You get 8GB of VRAM, which is fine for 1080p. It wouldn't be good enough for a 1440p build costing $1,500. I'm looking at you, NVIDIA, with the 60 Ti. However, for the build today, does the job very nicely. Super power efficient, only a single 8-pin PCI power connector. This ASUS dual card has 2 fans, all you need for a GPU that's of this caliber. Obviously, there are other coolers available, and don't necessarily just go with this ASUS one. Pick whichever one is the best value for you, and I'll link latest pricing for everything down at the links below. Now, of course, we need to actually build our system onto something, and that's where the motherboard choice comes into play. This is the ASRock A620M Pro RS. The A620 chipset that this board is based on has been a game changer for budget builds. Previously, B650 boards were a bit too pricey. If you pick up a board like this, you sacrifice overclocking for the CPU, something we don't really need anyway in a build of this caliber, and in return, get a board that comes in at a much lower price. But don't be put off by the fact that this board is undeniably quite cheap. You still, of course, get the AM5 socket, meaning you could theoretically put a Ryzen 7950 X3D in this board. Please don't do that. 4 RAM DIMM slots for dual channel DDR5 memory, a Gen 4 M.2 cover with a heatsink heat spreader, great to see, and an extra slot down below. And then on the rear, if you take a look at these crafted little antennas, we get Wi-Fi. They do a non-Wi-Fi version for $10 or so less, but I'd pick the Wi-Fi one, integrated rear I/O, and plenty of connectivity. There really isn't more that you could ask for. Of course, I'm going to go ahead and install the Ryzen 5 processor into the motherboard. That's nice and easy. Pull up the retention arm on the socket, lift up the cover nice and gently, and then drop the CPU in. The Ryzen tech should read the right way round, with the triangle up in the top left corner. Add the cover onto the CPU, return the arm, and the black plastic will ping off nice and quickly. While I'm here, I'm also going to add in the RAM or the memory. 32 gigs of Corsair's Vengeance RGB DDR5 does the business. Ideally, you want a kit with a cache latency of 40 or lower. That's going to help you get the advantage of DDR5 memory. In truth, any DDR5 you can buy for $80, $85 with 32 gigs of capacity is fine. DDR4 memory previously was a big advantage of Intel on the budget end, but I think it's so much more future-proof really for builds now and for years to come that it makes sense to spend nowadays probably only an extra $5 or $10. Before it was double or triple the price and obviously not as worthwhile. Pop that in, white or black kit's available, RGB, you can't really ask for much more. M.2 drive is next on the list of components to install. This is the Samsung SSD 980. Now, it isn't a Gen 4 NVMe, it isn't going to have speeds of 7,000 gigabytes per second. No, 7 gigabytes per second. But in return, it's really good value. $49 I paid for this 1 terabyte drive. You're not going to bottleneck the 6650 XT. It's still like 5 or 6 times quicker than even the fastest hard drives were, and more, of course, rapid than your original SATA SSDs. So nice and nippy, great performance. And if you want to spend another $30 or $40 and get slightly quicker boot up times, I'll link some alternatives down below. It just sits under the nice little heat spreader and connects in nice and easily to the motherboard. There is one more component I'm going to actually do now while the motherboard is out and easy to access, and it's this, the cooler. I was a little bit kind of torn as to what cooler to use for this build. Do I stick with the included stock Ryzen cooler? It would be okay, but for the sake of an extra $35, I instead opted to use this, the DeepCool AK400. And let me show you broadly why. This is the AK400, and this is the Ryzen stock cooler. Now, size-wise, there's no comparison. They say it's not about how large it is, but how you use it. I think in this case, a heatsink that's quite as piddly as this is never going to compete with one quite so voluminous as the AK400. In real terms, while we're not going to be overclocking, it just ensures the CPU can boost up to its maximum speed on as many occasions as possible and ensures temperatures stay nice and chilly. Great for the lifespan of your CPU and, of course, the cooling of your entire system. To pop this on, first add these orange sleeves around each corner of the processor. They click onto the screw threads that are already poking through the motherboard. Then take this included silver bracket and just add this and rest it gently on top. These will then be secured down by 4 included silver screws that come with the AK400. You can see here, it's just going to clamp to the bracket a little something like this. There's the second, the third, and last but certainly not least, the 4th screw, a little something like this. Now you can see that's going to provide 2 posts in which we can mount the cooler, and if I show you here, by removing the fan off the heatsink, how the cooler simply slots into place. I am actually going to do this now before moving it into the chassis, as it's just a lot easier. A drop of thermal paste goes onto the CPU, followed by the cooler itself, and then just tighten up each of those 2 screws. Fan can stay off, and we'll add this back in later when things are a bit more complete. Next up, I'm going to clear some of the work surface out of the way, you don't need the GPU box anymore, and open up the case choice for this system. Now, I have got a bit of an admission to make. I have been just a little bit boring. And by boring, I mean I'm using exactly the same case I used the other week because I love it so much. This is the Montech Air 100. You can get it in a Lite variant, an RGB variant, so many different options out there, black or white. I think I might buy a black version for another budget build in future. This is a Micro ATX chassis, which I personally think is the best form factor for both beginner or new builders and actually cheaper systems, as of course we can use cheaper Micro ATX motherboards that still deliver all the features we need. And with the RGB version coming with a plethora of included fans, there really isn't much else you could ask for with a chassis like this for $50 give or take. Latest pricing information will be linked, as always, down below. With this being a Micro ATX board, all the standoffs are in the right place in our Micro ATX case, meaning it should just be a case of sliding the I/O through the rear I/O cutout and then affixing the motherboard into place. By the looks of things, the I/O's caught on something. Is it a fan cable? Yes, it is. Let's pull that out of there. Aha, that's looking a little bit better. And once it's all lined up, a screw on all of the different holes. There's 3 at the top, 3 down the middle, and 2 towards the bottom. So 8 in total on this board is going to secure everything nice and easily. Add the fan back onto the cooler at the end to finish things off. And otherwise, looking pretty good. I don't know why I sounded so surprised that it's looking good. I mean, I built it. I hope it looks good. The next order of business is to pop into place the GPU. Now, we'll be looking at performance in more detail later, but just to further explain this choice, you can see here that it beats out the 3060 very comfortably. That's probably the closest competitor, although that hasn't really come down as much in price as something like the 6650 XT, or even knocking on the door of the likes of the 3060 Ti. AMD's new Radeon 7600 is going to provide more performance, but will cost probably $130 more than this card, pushing us well over that $900 budget that we've managed to contain things in today. If we move the case around, you can see here where the GPU is going to install. Looking at the top PCI slot, you can see the graphics card is going to slot in nice and easily. The PCI covers at the back, that's these things here, have already been removed, so no need to worry about those. They are the snap-on type, so that means once they're out, they're out. So make sure you pop the right ones in. I don't love that sort of method, but obviously it's a cost-saving measure and helps to keep the case super cheap. Slide the card in, bit of a click, nice and easy, couple of screws to fasten it down, and then just move the rear cover over, and we're pretty much good to go. Obviously, it doesn't match the color scheme perfectly because it's black and not white, but try finding a white, awesome 1080p GPU for under $250 $20. Spoiler alert, it's quite difficult. The final stage of the build then is cables and wiring. In terms of cables, you can actually pick up something like this, some PSU cable extensions. I got these for a little over $22. Now in a budget build, you might deem this $22 of wastage that you could put elsewhere. And by that admission, they aren't mandatory, but I think they make a massive difference for what is not a lot of extra money. Different colours, different options available, I'll link them below. I'll be coupling them up with a 500 watt 80 plus certified PSU from Cooler Master. Our build today is super efficient. The CPU sips power, as does the GPU, and with no other major areas to provide power, there's no need to go for something expensive. This is going to work great. Add this in, wire all those cables up, the extensions just slot into the existing PSU power cables, and we're good to go. CPU to the top left, motherboard is the largest cable and goes to the far right, while the GPU plugs up to the graphics card just above the Radeon logo. It's also a good idea at this stage to plug up the front panel cables. JFP one is first, they're all your power reset fiddly ones to the bottom right hand side of the motherboard. I'll pop a diagram on screen now to make it a little bit easier. USB 3 goes to the right hand side of the board and powers up the USB 3 ports, while our USB 2 and HD audio front panel cables look very similar and go along the bottom left hand side of the board. And once that's done, the build is ready to go, and I think looking fantastic. But will it look any good once it's powered up? The only way to find out, in typical GeekaWhat style, is for an awesome montage, and I'll rejoin you for some gaming benchmarks in just a few seconds. With this $900 gaming PC now assembled and ready to go, it's time to take a look at the performance. It really is impressive what you can get for relatively quite a low amount of money, and the games I tested today really demonstrate that. Let's start off with something that's AAA, something that's going to really push this system to the max: Hogwarts Legacy at 1080p high settings. The 6650 XT pulled in an impressive average of 96 FPS with consistent 90 and 99th percentile results. The good results carried on rolling through into the next title, Warzone 2. This is a little bit less AAA, but still quite a demanding game, and at 1080p high settings, the system broke through the triple-digit frame rate mark. Only marginally, with 101 FPS on average, but it still did so, which is super impressive. Tuned down to medium, you'll be able to obviously get well past the 100 mark, 120, 130 in terms of the frames per second, making this quite a competitive build. Talking of competitive, I also tested Fortnite at 1080p competitive settings to show that those of you looking for those really high triple-digit frame rates can achieve it. Here the build pulled in 270 FPS with 255 and 240 for the 90 and 99th percentile results. That's with everything tuned down to low except the render distance set to far. In Apex Legends at 1080p high settings this time around, the build also excelled. 178 FPS on average was mightily impressive, with solid 90 and 99th percentile results too. In slightly easier to run games like Overwatch 2 at 1080p Ultra, the build pulled in 226 frames per second on average. Wow, with 90 and 99th percentile results in the region of 211 and 187. I also tested Call of Duty's Modern Warfare 2 Remastered. 1080p high in this title yielded 106 FPS on average, while older titles like GTA 5 also delivered good results. 1080p high here again delivered 157 FPS. It really is impressive how good of a system you can build for $900. And there are some awesome upgrades you can make too for another $100 or so to take this build one step further. If you enjoyed it, make sure to drop a like rating, get subscribed. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next GeekaWhat video.